Hi, this is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com, talking with you today about being pure human, and also the book by Gregg Braden is called Pure Human. Why does that matter so much to me? What are the divine advantages of remaining pure human? Well, first of all, thank you for joining me today, wise humans. Really appreciate your participation and engagement, asking good questions, asking specifically the kind of questions we want to hear the answers to. So why am I interested in this new book that just came out by Gregg Braden? Why did I need to get a copy of it as soon as possible? Good question. Basically, I just dropped it. Yeah, the reason is I have a long history of interest in that very exact term, pure human. That would be the phrase I would use to describe my job, my goal, my objective and intention in my most recent past life in the future. Pretty much circa 2500, and the reason I engaged in that lifetime, which has resonated strongly through this lifetime for me, of course I was not born in the year 2500 in this lifetime, but that was where I came from most recently. My interaction with that lifetime is interesting because in that past life, about 500 years in the future from now it's not going to sound as outrageous as it used to. But it had repercussions, shall we say. Pretty much everything was run by a central artificial intelligence consciousness, and I was checking it out, as I said. So I was looking to see in a possible timeline like that one, which still had, there was one pure human, and that was the criteria. As long as there's still at least one pure human, there was one, then I was there to check it out. What I saw was shocking, frankly. What I witnessed was just a world that seemed on the face of things and all the checklist items looked great. There was no war, check. No environmental issues, check. Looked like there was no crime, check, et cetera, et cetera. Humans could live to be easily 150 to 180 years old, if not longer, check. Humans could do whatever they want, so, sort of. Now that's where it gets interesting. And if you read that fast and loose, humans have free will, sort of. The trouble is, there'd been, in that particular timeline, there had been a decision made along the way to, and maybe it wasn't done consciously, but for whatever the reasons were, what ended up happening is that all of the augmented humans, the transhumans of that future possible world, were heavily run and I'd say managed, shepherded, looked after by the central artificial intelligence. And what happens when that occurs is that basically humans, if they think outside the lines that they're supposed to color inside, then they're given a shutdown command. And that can happen as sort of, you can think of it like an electromagnetic pulse, that's what we would call it. And it could be done remotely. And you might think this sounds like science fiction. We're already there. There's already technology to do this kind of things, and there is the Internet of biological beings. So this stuff is happening now. And that's the reason for the urgency of the book, Pure Human. Now I want to get into that book a little bit because it's so amazing, and like I said, it's picking up on the very phrase that I was utilizing as my basic term of, assessing and determining, evaluating how is that timeline in terms of humanity. I would give that timeline I checked out a fail because, number one, there was only one pure human left. She was the only one successfully not just opting out of the myriad ways that transhuman agendas could be progressed and put forth, but she was doing everything it took to remain pure human. She was regarding that with great respect. You might wonder, why does that matter? What aren't humans inferior to things we can invent? Thank you for asking. This book starts to explain exactly that kind of misunderstanding. So Gregg Braden, he's a scientist who's had a decade-long interest in basically consciousness and humanity. He's done a lot of work that I've sometimes referenced when he talks about transhumanism, and he brings up I have a similar interest in the Hopi prophecy rock, so does he. So when he brings that up, I sometimes mention that he's done an excellent job describing what the Hopi were talking about. But getting to his book, this is where it gets really interesting, because when you look at pure humans and these assumptions that we've made that our technology would necessarily be better, Basically, I would agree with Gregg Braden when he states in his book, and he's got scientific studies to back him up, saying that no, pretty much every time there's some advancement made in our technology, we come to find out that nature was there first. Often our human bodies are designed to be, as Gregg Braden points out, an antenna, which enables us to give and receive messages. Like when we ask that question that I love, how good can it get? When you consider anything, like we're looking at transhumanism, we're looking at pure humans, how good can it get? Yes. So of course we're asking that question. And we're asking it because it looks like when you ask the question about how do we know that there's some sort of design going on here? This is where Gregg Braden's work stands out superbly and in a class of its own, because he's done some work with gematria, which is the study of ancient languages. In this case, he looked at Hebrew as an example in this book. There are some other root languages that go all the way back, like Sumerian and ancient Aramaic and so forth. But when he did a decoding, which he describes in the book, Pure Human, he summarizes something that he'd covered previously in the God Code, which is that our DNA itself, when you look at the very fundamental building blocks of our DNA, it clearly translates to God eternal within the body. So if you don't like the word God, think of eternal, think of the absolute. Like I've often said, if you're just an atheist and you want to stay there, that's okay with me. But you want to keep in mind that then there's still that census taker viewpoint of the absolute consciousness, which does exist outside of our linear time. It has an eternal, absolute nature to it. And I believe that's what Gregg Braden's getting at here. Also, Gregg Braden points out the word, let's see, I'm trying to find it. Yeah, what is the word that I'm looking for? Divinity. So divinity is the key here because it's in the subtitle, the hidden truth of our divinity, power, and destiny. And the divinity that he describes is powers or forces that transcend perceived limitations. So that would be early in the book. On page 2, he covers that. Later, he gets into the point by Neville Goddard, which I think was brilliant, where Neville Goddard furthers that idea of the divinity and says each person is born with an infinite power against which no earthly force is of the slightest significance. We can thus reawaken previously hidden and unexplored gifts, this is me now, that most of us have had no idea we're capable of. So we therefore, as Gregg Braden points out, sometimes humans need, or we benefit when we see an example of doing these sorts of things. I think that's true. I do cover superpowers and quantum superpowers and how not ordinary, but how natural that is in my new book, The Mandela Effect and Its Society. That's really where my book's going. It starts showing, this is the Mandela Effect, what do you notice? And then toward the end of the book, I'm definitely getting into the superpower ideas and showing that this is part of who we are. I had a couple of other favorite parts of this book, Pure Human. One of them is where Gregg Braden was taking a hike in Chaco Canyon, and he ran into an indigenous man, First Nations person. And Gregg wondered, what are you doing here? And the gentleman replied, listening to my ancestors. And he went on to explain that there had been past times in humanity where the ancestors had built some machines and devices to mimic the powers within themselves, not recognizing that those powers are intrinsic to who they actually are. And that had been pretty much the end of those societies. And I referenced earlier about the Hopi Prophecy Rock. I do cover this in a lot of my videos, books, and writings. And it's also an idea that I have that we don't need transhumanism. I've put forth the idea of Revhumanism. So this is all very, very much in strong alignment with Pure Human. We're thinking similarly but differently, and I love that. So it's pretty exciting. If you're wondering what's Revhumanism, just a quick summary of that. Basically, I include some of that also in my new book, The Mandela Effect and Its Society. I've got a web page up on my website about it. And basically, the idea is that the Latin REV that I use for Revhumanism relates to ideas of reviving, regaining, and recalling, and growing strong and young again. So Rev also stands for me for reverence, and so I doubly love it. So it's that very, very high top of the David Hawkins scale, reverence, just bliss and ecstasy, a state of being that you can get into. And actually, there's an exercise in this Pure Human book where Gregg describes how to entrain, he calls it entraining your heart and your mind. You can do that by bringing attention to your heart, focusing on making your exhales a little bit longer in duration than your inhales, and really focusing on something or someone that you love. And you do that, and you are revving up that level of conscious agency that you're operating at, bringing it to a higher and higher vibratory frequency, absolutely accessing these high levels that you can then witness miracles with. Another thing I love in the book, Pure Human, I'm skipping around here, but Gregg describes a medicineless hospital, basically working without any kind of medicine we would qualify as medicine in China. And he was observing the video that the practitioner teaching and running the class was showing of just a 4-minute short video where a woman had a tumor and people were surrounding, just saying in Chinese, already done, already done. And obviously they must have had that entrainment field going between their heart and their head. They know they can do this based on prior examples and experience, like I also cover in my book, The Mandela Effect and Its Society. And I agree, when you know these things can happen, we can do them for everybody. This is meant for humanity. This is our true nature. So how good can it get when we remember that we're pure human? Phenomenal. So I welcome to see you in that wonderful golden age that we often speak of at the International Mandela Effect Conference, that we can create this. And we're doing it right now by asking together, individually and together, how good can it get? So please know that I love you so, so very, very much, and look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.